There was something strange about my neighbor's garden, and I don't mean a little strange. I mean the kind of strange that makes you stop at the fence and look twice. For years, I almost never saw weeds growing there. Not a few here and there. Not little patches she pulled out every weekend. I mean, almost nothing. The soil looked clean, the walking paths were clean, even the cracks between the stones looked clean. Meanwhile, every spring, my own garden looked like somebody had come in overnight and planted weeds on purpose. One day, it looked fine. A few days later, there they were again. Little green troublemakers everywhere, between the rows, along the edges, pushing through the walkway. I tried to keep up, but it felt like a fight I could never really win. I used to think my neighbor must have some expensive secret. Maybe some special spray from a garden center. Maybe she spent hours out there every morning before anyone else was awake. Or maybe she just had better soil, better luck, or more patience than I did. That is what we tell ourselves sometimes, right? When someone else gets better results, we assume they must have something we don't. But then one morning, I saw her walking through the garden with a small spray bottle. Not a big chemical sprayer, not some fancy machine. Just a simple hand sprayer, the kind you might use around the house. She was spraying the paths, the edges of the beds, and the cracks between the stones. That caught my attention. So after years of wondering, I finally asked her what she was using. And when she told me, I honestly didn't know whether to laugh or feel embarrassed, because the answer was sitting in my own kitchen the whole time. It was not straight vinegar. It was not salt. And it was not a harsh weed killer. It was something simple, cheap, and ordinary. Something most people already have at home but never think to use this way. But here is the part that matters. The real secret was not just the ingredient. That is where most people get it wrong. They hear one simple trick, try it once, use it at the wrong time, spray it in the wrong place, and then say it does not work. My neighbor did it differently. She knew exactly how to mix it, when to apply it, where to spray it, and most importantly, what to do after the weeds were gone. That last step is what keeps her garden looking clean for the whole season. And once I understood that, I realized I had not been losing the weed battle because I was lazy. I was losing because I was only fighting what I could see on top of the soil, while the real problem was waiting underneath. So, if your garden looks clean for a few days and then the weeds come right back, this may be the simple method you have been missing. Here is the part most gardeners need to hear first. If weeds keep coming back in your garden, it does not mean you are lazy. It does not mean you are bad at gardening. And it definitely does not mean you are doing everything wrong. Weeds are just built to survive. That is the annoying truth. You can pull them out today, feel proud for a minute, and then a few days later, there they are again. Tiny green leaves popping up like they were just waiting for you to turn your back. And, in a way, they were. Weed seeds can sit in the soil for years. Some of them can stay there for 10, 15, even 20 years, just waiting for the right moment. They do not need much. A little sunlight, a little moisture, a bare patch of soil. That is enough. Once those conditions show up, the seeds wake up and start growing. This is why spring can feel so frustrating. You clean up the garden, the weather warms up, the soil gets damp, and suddenly it looks like weeds have taken over overnight. But those seeds were not all new. Many of them were already in the ground long before you even noticed them. And they do not only come from your own yard. The wind can bring them in. Birds can carry them. They can stick to your shoes, your gloves, your tools, even your dog's paws. Sometimes you bring in a bag of soil or compost from the store, and a few hidden seeds come with it. Your neighbor's yard can send them over the fence. A dry weed down the street can release seeds that end up right in your flower bed. That is why fighting weeds feels endless. You are not just dealing with the weeds you can see. You are dealing with all the seeds waiting underneath the surface. And every time the soil is left open and uncovered, those seeds get their chance. This is the mistake I made for years. I thought if I pulled the weeds out, the job was done. So I would spend a Saturday morning on my knees, filling a bucket with weeds, thinking I had finally cleaned the place up. And for a few days, it looked great. Then the first little sprouts would appear again. At first, just one or two, then 10, then a whole line of them along the edge of the bed. It felt like the garden was mocking me, but the truth was simple. I had removed the weeds, but I had not changed the conditions that allowed new ones to grow. The soil was still bare. Light was still hitting the surface. Moisture was still there. And under that soil, thousands of seeds were still waiting. Once I understood that, I stopped taking it personally. Weeds are not a sign that you failed. They are a sign that nature is doing what nature does. Empty soil does not stay empty for long. Something will grow there. If you do not cover it, plant it, mulch it, or manage it, weeds will move in first. That is why the real goal is not just to pull weeds. The real goal is to stop giving them an open invitation. And once you see it that way, weed control starts to make a lot more sense. Now, before we get into the method my neighbor used, let's be honest about the old ways most of us have tried. Because if you have a garden, you have probably done at least one of these. I know I have. The first one is hand pulling weeds. And yes, it works for a moment. You get down on your knees, grab the weed, pull it out, shake off the dirt, and toss it in a bucket. It feels good at first. You look back and think, there, finally, the bed looks clean. But then your back starts hurting. Your knees get sore. Your hands get rough. And the worst part is, a few days later, the weeds are back. Why? Because a lot of the time, you only pulled the top. The root snapped off underground. And once that root is still alive, the weed is not really gone. It is just waiting to come back. Then there is vinegar. A lot of people swear by vinegar, and I understand why. It is cheap. It is easy to find. It feels safer than harsh chemicals. And when you spray it on young weeds, you can see the leaves burn pretty fast. The problem is, vinegar mostly works on what you can see. It hits the leaves. It dries them out. But many times, the roots stay alive under the soil. So the top looks dead, and you think you won. Then a week later, the same weed pushes up again in the same spot. It is frustrating because it looks like it worked, but it did not finish the job. Salt is another one people talk about. And yes, salt can kill weeds. But here is the problem. Salt does not stop with the weed. It can damage the soil itself. If you use too much salt in a garden bed, you may end up with soil where nothing wants to grow. Not your flowers. Not your vegetables, not your grass, nothing. That is not really weed control. That is giving up the whole piece of ground. And once salt builds up in the soil, it does not just disappear overnight. It can stay there and cause problems for a long time. Then there is boiling water. I have used that too, especially on weeds growing between patio stones or in driveway cracks. For small spots, it can help. You boil a kettle, pour it right on the weed, and the plant wilts down. But it is not practical for a whole garden. You are not going to carry pot after pot of boiling water across the yard all afternoon. And just like vinegar, boiling water often only damages the top growth. If the weed has a strong root, it may come right back. It also takes a lot of time, and you have to be careful not to burn yourself. Then we have the store-bought chemical weed killers, and I will be fair here. They can work fast, sometimes very fast. You spray, wait a day or two, and the weeds start turning yellow and brown. That quick result is why so many people use them. But a lot of gardeners do not feel comfortable spraying strong chemicals all over the places where their kids play, where their dogs walk, or where they grow food. Some people worry about the soil. Some worry about bees, butterflies, worms, and all the little living things that make a garden healthy. And honestly, I understand that. A garden is not just dirt with plants in it. It is a living space. When you spray something harsh, you may kill the weed, but you may also disturb the life around it. That was the problem I kept running into. Every method seemed to come with a catch. Pulling weeds took too much time and left roots behind. Vinegar burned the leaves but often missed the roots. Salt was too risky for the soil. Boiling water only made sense for small cracks. Chemicals worked fast, but I did not want to depend on them every season. So for a long time, I felt stuck. I thought weeds were just part of having a yard. You clean them up, they come back, and you do it all over again. But my neighbor's garden proved something different. The answer was not to work harder every weekend. It was to use a method that hit the weed more completely, then follow it with prevention so the next batch of seeds did not get an easy chance to grow. What really made me pay attention was not something I read online. It was not a product ad. It was the garden right next door. Every time I looked across the fence, my neighbor's yard looked like it belonged in a gardening magazine. Her vegetable beds were clean, not perfect in a fake way, but clean in that calm, cared-for way. You could see the dark soil between the rows. The paths were clear. The edges of the beds were sharp. Even the cracks between the stepping stones did not have grass pushing through them. And that is what bothered me the most, honestly. Because at my place, weeds seemed to find every tiny opening they could. A crack in the walkway, a gap near the fence, a bare spot beside the tomatoes. If there was 1 inch of space, something unwanted would show up there. But in her garden, it was different. I kept telling myself she must have some special trick. Maybe she was out there every morning before sunrise. Maybe she used some strong weed killer and just never talked about it. Maybe her soil was different. Maybe she had better luck. I had a whole list of excuses ready, because it was easier than admitting she might know something I did not. And for a long time I did not ask. I know that sounds silly, but a lot of us are like that. We would rather struggle quietly than walk over and say, "Hey, how are you doing this?" There is this little bit of pride that gets in the way. You do not want to look like you have no idea what you are doing, especially with gardening. People act like you should just know these things. So I kept fighting weeds in my own yard, and I kept looking over at hers, wondering what I was missing. Then one afternoon, I saw her sitting outside with a cup of coffee. She looked relaxed, like someone who had already finished the hard work for the day. I finally decided to ask. I walked over, pointed toward her garden, and said something like, "I have to know. How do you keep your paths and beds so clean?" I expected her to laugh or give me some vague answer. Maybe tell me it just takes years of practice. But she did not. She smiled, like the answer was obvious. Then she told me exactly what she does. No secrecy, no special brand, no expensive bottle from the store. Just a simple mix she had been using for years. And when I heard it, I almost felt embarrassed, because the main ingredient was something I already had in my kitchen. I had probably walked past it 100 times while complaining about weeds. That was the moment I realized the secret was not complicated at all. It was simple, almost too simple. But she also made one thing very clear. You cannot just throw it around and expect magic. You have to use it the right way. You have to spray the right spots, at the right time, in the right weather. And after the weeds are gone, you have to stop the next ones from getting started. That is what she understood. She was not just killing weeds, she was managing the whole cycle. And that is why her garden stayed clean, while mine kept turning into the same mess every spring. Once she explained it, everything finally made sense. It was not luck. It was not some expensive secret. It was a simple habit, done at the right moment, year after year. So, here is the recipe my neighbor gave me. And honestly, this is the part that surprised me the most, because there was nothing fancy about it. No expensive bottle from the garden center. No harsh chemical smell. No long list of ingredients you can barely pronounce. Just 4 simple things. You need 200 grams of baking soda, about 1 regular box. You need 1 liter of hot water, not boiling, just hot. Somewhere around 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit is about right. You need 1 tablespoon of regular dish soap, the kind sitting next to your kitchen sink. And then you need 2 tablespoons of plain kitchen vinegar, nothing special. Not industrial strength vinegar, not some strong gardening vinegar, just the regular kind most people already have at home. That is it. 4 basic ingredients. And when I first heard that, I thought, really? That is what keeps your garden that clean? But the more she explained it, the more sense it made. The baking soda is the main ingredient. The hot water helps it dissolve and helps the mixture work better. The dish soap helps the liquid stick to the leaves instead of rolling right off. And the vinegar gives it a little extra push, especially on weeds with a tougher surface. Now the way you mix it matters. Do not just dump everything into a cold bottle and shake it like crazy. Start with the hot water. Pour 1 liter into a container. Then add the baking soda slowly and stir until it is fully dissolved. You do not want clumps sitting at the bottom. Once the baking soda is mixed in, add 1 tablespoon of dish soap. Stir it gently. Do not whip it into a big pile of bubbles. Then add 2 tablespoons of vinegar and stir again. You may see a little reaction, and that is normal. Just mix it calmly. After that, pour the liquid into a spray bottle. A simple hand sprayer works fine for small areas. If you have a bigger yard or a long driveway, you can use a pump sprayer. The recipe stays the same. You just multiply the amount. For example, if you use 5 liters of water, you would use 5 times the baking soda, 5 tablespoons of dish soap, and 10 tablespoons of vinegar. But I would not mix more than you need for that day. This is one of those things you want to make fresh and use right away. My neighbor was very clear about that. She said the mixture loses strength if it sits too long, so do not make a big batch and leave it in the garage for weeks. Mix it, pour it into the sprayer, and use it the same day. That is the best way. And another thing, this is not meant to be sprayed all over the garden like water. You are not feeding the soil with it. You are not giving the plants a boost. This is for weeds. Only weeds. You aim it directly at the leaves and the center of the plant. That is where a lot of people mess up. They hear baking soda and think it is harmless everywhere because we use it in the kitchen. But in the garden, when it is mixed this way, it can damage any plant it touches. So you have to treat it with respect. If a weed is growing in a driveway crack, along a fence, between stepping stones, or on the edge of a bed, this method makes sense. If it is growing right next to your lettuce, basil, tomatoes, or flowers, be careful. Use a piece of cardboard as a shield, or apply it with a small brush instead of spraying. The recipe is simple, but the control is what makes it work. That is why my neighbor's garden stayed clean without looking burned or damaged. She was not spraying wildly. She was precise. She mixed a fresh batch, waited for the right weather, and sprayed only what needed to go. And that is the big lesson here. You do not need a shelf full of expensive products to deal with weeds. Sometimes the best solution is cheap and ordinary. But cheap does not mean careless. Use the right amount. Mix it fresh. Spray it on the right spot. And do not save old leftovers thinking they will work the same next week. This little homemade mix is not magic, but when you use it the right way, it can do a lot more than most people expect.
Baking soda,
Now,
vinegar, and
let's
soap.
talk about
Are
why
you sure
this
this is
simple
enough?
mix actually
That's what the
works.
internet says.
Because I know what it
Seems
sounds
too
like
easy,
at
doesn't
first.
it?
Baking soda,
this zucchini
vinegar,
here,
and dish
you wanna
soap for
pick it when it's
weeds.
firm,
It
about
almost
this
sounds
size.
too simple.
Any bigger,
I
and
thought
it
the
starts to
same
lose its
thing.
flavor.
But once my neighbor
Okay, that
explained
makes
it in
sense.
plain
As you
English,
can see,
it
the
started to
reaction
make
between the
sense.
vinegar and baking
Each
soda,
ingredient has a
stabilized by
job,
the soap,
and when you
creates
put them
this
together
thick
the right
foam
way,
that
they do
smothers
more
the
than they would
weeds.
on their own. The baking soda is the main part of the recipe. When it lands on the leaves, it changes the surface of the plant. Most weeds are not built to handle that kind of sudden change. It throws them off. It also pulls moisture out of the plant cells, so the weed does not just look burned on the outside. It slowly starts drying out. That is why, after a few days, you may see the edges turn yellow, then brown, then the whole plant starts to curl and collapse. It is not instant, and that is important to understand. This is not one of those sprays where everything looks dead in 2 hours. It takes a little time, but that slower effect is part of why it can work so well when applied correctly. The plant gets hit where it is weakest, and little by little, it loses the moisture it needs to keep growing. Then there is the vinegar. A lot of people use vinegar by itself and get disappointed, and I understand why. Vinegar can burn the top of a weed, but many times the root stays alive. So the weed looks dead for a few days, then comes right back. But in this mix, vinegar is not acting alone. Think of it more like the ingredient that opens the door. Many weeds have a thin, waxy coating on their leaves.
The trichomes look
That coating
excellent.
helps protect them from drying out and from anything landing on the surface. The vinegar helps break through that layer. It makes it easier for the rest of the mixture to get where it needs to go. So instead of the spray just sitting on top of the leaf, it has a better chance of soaking in and doing real damage. Then comes the dish soap. This might seem like the least important part, but it matters a lot. If you spray plain water on a leaf, you will notice it often beads up and rolls off. That is because the leaf surface is designed to shed water. The dish soap changes that. It helps the liquid spread out and stick. Instead of forming little droplets that slide onto the ground, the mixture coats the leaf more evenly. That means more contact, more coverage, more time for the baking soda and vinegar to do their work. My neighbor explained it in a way I never forgot. She said the vinegar opens the way, the soap helps the mix hold on, and the baking soda dries the weed out. That is the whole idea. One ingredient weakens the weed's protection. One keeps the solution in place. One does the heavy lifting. Alone, each one has limits. Together, they hit the weed from different sides. And that is why this mix can work better than plain vinegar or plain baking soda by itself. But here is the thing people need to remember. This mixture does not know the difference between a weed and a plant you love. It does not look at your garden and say, "That one is a tomato, leave it alone." If it lands on a leaf, it can damage that leaf. That is why spraying carefully matters so much. You want the solution on the weed, not all over the soil, not on your flowers, and definitely not on your vegetables. Aim for the leaves. Aim for the center of the plant. If the weed is close to something you want to keep, use a piece of cardboard as a shield. It may feel like a small detail, but that small detail can save your plants. Another thing that matters is weather. If the leaves are wet from rain or morning dew, the mixture gets diluted. It becomes weaker before it has a chance to work. If the sun is too hot, it may dry too fast. That is why the best time is usually late afternoon or early evening on a dry day. The leaves are dry. The heat is not too strong, and the mixture has the whole night to sit there and work. That is exactly how my neighbor used it. She was not guessing. She was not spraying whenever she remembered. She had a simple routine, and that routine made the recipe
So
more
you take the
effective.
baking soda
So
first,
yes, the
then the
ingredients are
vinegar, and a
basic,
squirt of
nothing
this soap.
fancy,
See?
nothing
I
expensive.
see. That makes
But the
sense.
reason they work is because they each play a role. Vinegar helps break through. Dish soap helps the spray stick. Baking soda dries the weed down. And when you apply it at the right time, in the right place, on a dry weed, that simple mix can be much more powerful than it looks. Now let's talk about how to actually spray the weeds, because this is where a lot of people get it wrong. They make the mix, walk outside, spray a little
These
here
three
and there,
types represent
and then
the
wonder why
biggest
some weeds
challenges.
come back.
The
The truth
taproot,
is,
the
not every
spreading
weed
rhizomes,
grows the same
and the
way.
climbing vine.
Some weeds have one deep root. Some spread under the soil like a hidden web. Some climb, twist, and send their roots way down where you cannot reach them by hand. So if you want this method to work, you have to spray with a little strategy. Let's start with dandelions, because almost everyone has dealt with them. They look harmless when they are little yellow flowers, but once they turn into those white puffballs, they can spread seeds everywhere. The hard part is the root. A dandelion has a long taproot that goes straight down into the soil. If you pull it and the root breaks, the plant can come right back from what is left underground. So with dandelions, do not just mist the leaves from far away. Aim for the center of the plant, right where all the leaves meet. That middle spot is the target. Spray it well enough that the solution runs down into the crown of the plant. You want it to hit the leaves, but you also want it to move toward the base, because that is where the real weakness is. Be generous, but be precise. The leaves should look wet, not just lightly touched. Now, if you are dealing with weeds that spread through underground roots or runners, you need to handle them a little differently. These are the weeds that make you feel like you are losing your mind. You pull one out in one spot, and a week later it pops
The
up
real
2 feet
danger
away.
lies beneath the
That is
surface.
because the plant
These
is
runners can
connected
spread
underground.
dozens of feet
It
in a
is not
single
just
season,
one weed.
choking out
It is
native
more like a
growers.
little underground system. For this kind of weed, spray the leaves first, but also spray the soil right around the base of the plant. Do not flood the whole garden. Just wet the area close to the weed. The goal is to weaken the top growth and also get some of that solution down near the shallow roots. One treatment may not be enough. That is normal. These weeds store energy below the soil, so they can try to send up new shoots. Give it about a week, then check again. If you see new green growth, spray it again. Most of the time, after the second or third treatment, the plant is much weaker and stops coming back with the same strength. Then there are climbing weeds, like bindweed. These are tough. They wrap around fences, flower stems, tomato cages, and anything else they can grab. They may look thin and fragile, but do not let that fool you. The roots can go very deep, and that is why pulling them often feels pointless. You tug on the vine, it breaks, and the root stays buried like nothing happened. With climbing weeds, you need patience. Spray as many leaves as you can reach. The more leaf surface you cover, the better chance the mixture has to move through the plant and weaken it. Do not expect bindweed or other tough vines to disappear after one spray. That is not realistic. You may need to spray once a week for 3 or 4 weeks. After each round, watch what happens. The leaves may start to yellow. The stems may lose strength. The vine may stop reaching upward. That is progress. It may not look dramatic on day 1, but if you keep after it, the plant starts running out of energy. And here is something important for all weeds, no matter what type they are. Spray on a dry day. Do not spray right after rain. Do not spray when the leaves are covered in dew. If the leaves are wet, the mixture gets watered down before it can do its job. It will slide off or become too weak. You also want a day when no rain is expected for at least 24 hours. If rain comes too soon, it washes the mix away and you have wasted your time. The best time to spray is usually late afternoon or early evening, not early morning, because there may still be dew on the leaves. Not in the middle of a hot sunny day, because the spray can dry too quickly. Late afternoon gives you a nice window. The leaves are dry, the sun is not beating down as hard, and the solution has all night to sit there and work. That one detail can make a big difference. Also, be careful where you point the sprayer. This mixture does not care whether a plant is a weed or something you planted on purpose. If it touches your flowers, vegetables, or lawn grass, it can damage them too. So aim carefully. If a weed is growing close to a plant you want to keep, use a piece of cardboard as a shield. Hold it between the weed and the good plant, then spray. It is simple, but it works. For really tight spots, you can even use a small paintbrush and brush the mixture directly onto the weed leaves. It takes a little longer, but it is much safer around plants you care about. The main thing is this: do not spray like you are watering the yard. This is
First,
not
for
a
the
blanket
dandelions,
treatment.
spray the
This is
center.
targeted
For
work.
spreading weeds, focus on the
Dandelions need
base
the
and
center
leaves.
sprayed. Spreading
Finally,
weeds
ensure
need
the
the
climbing
leaves and
vine
the
is
base. Climbing weeds need as many leaves covered as possible, with repeat treatments. And every weed needs dry weather, careful aim, and enough time for the mixture to do its job. Once I started spraying this way, instead of just randomly misting whatever looked green, the results changed completely. I finally felt like I was working with a plan instead of just reacting every time weeds showed up. Now, after you spray the weeds, do not expect everything to look dead right away. This is where a lot of people get impatient. They spray the mixture, walk outside an hour later, and think, well, nothing happened. I did the same thing the first time. I kept checking like I was waiting for some big dramatic change. But on day one, there really was not much to see. The weeds were still green. They still looked alive. If you looked closely, you might notice a thin white film on the leaves. That is just the baking soda drying on the surface. Other than that, the plant may look almost normal. And that is okay. This method does not work like a harsh chemical spray that knocks everything down in a few hours. It works slower, but if you sprayed it the right way, it is already starting to stress the plant. You just cannot see the full effect yet. By day 3, that is when things start to change. The edges of the leaves usually begin to turn yellow. Some leaves may curl inward. Others may look limp, like they have lost their strength. With dandelions, you may notice the whole rosette starts looking tired and dry. It almost looks like the plant aged a month in just a couple of days. That is the baking soda doing its job. The weed is losing moisture, and the leaves are beginning to break down. This is the point where you know the mixture is working. But still, do not pull it yet. Let it keep going. Give it more time to reach deeper into the plant. By day 7, the difference is usually much clearer. The green color fades, the leaves turn brown, the stems get brittle. Some weeds become so dry that they crumble when you touch them. And when you pull them, they often come up easier than before. That is one of the best parts. You are not fighting a strong, fresh plant anymore. You are removing something that has already been weakened. With small weeds, one treatment may be enough. With dandelions, if you sprayed the center well, you may see the whole plant collapse within a week. But with tougher weeds, do not be surprised if they try to come back. That does not mean the method failed. It just means the weed has more energy stored underground. Some weeds have deep roots. Some have runners. Some have hidden pieces under the soil that can push up new growth. For those, you may need to spray again after about a week. Sometimes one more treatment is enough. Sometimes it takes 2. For really stubborn vines or spreading weeds, you may need to stay with it for 3 or 4 weeks. The key is to watch the plant. If new green leaves appear, hit those leaves again while they are still young. Do not wait until the weed has rebuilt itself. That was the biggest lesson for me. I used to wait too long. I would see a tiny new sprout and think, I'll deal with that later. Then later became next weekend, and by then the weed was strong again. Now I handle it early. A quick spray in the right spot saves a lot of work later. And remember, the goal is not just to make the top look dead. The goal is to weaken the whole plant enough that it stops coming back. So be patient with the process. Day 1 may look boring. Day 3 shows the first signs. Day 7 is when you usually see the real result. And if the weed is stubborn, repeat the treatment instead of giving up. Once you see the leaves yellowing, curling, drying, and finally turning brown, you know the method is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. Now, before anyone runs outside with a spray bottle, I need to say this clearly. This mixture can work well on weeds, but you have to respect it. Just because the ingredients are simple does not mean you can spray it everywhere. Baking soda, vinegar, and dish soap may sound harmless because we use them around the house, but in the garden, this mix can damage any plant it touches. It does not know the difference between a weed and your tomato plant. It does not know you spent 6 weeks growing that basil from seed. If the spray lands on the leaves of a plant you care about, it can hurt that plant too. So the first place I would not use it is directly inside vegetable beds. I know that is where weeds can be really annoying. They pop up between lettuce, peppers, beans, carrots, and tomatoes. But if you spray carelessly in that area, you may hit your vegetables along with the weeds, and that is not worth it. In vegetable beds, I would rather pull the weeds by hand, use mulch, or apply the mixture very carefully with a small brush if the weed is isolated. The second place to avoid is the lawn. This is a big one. If you have weeds growing in the grass, do not spray this mix across the yard unless you are okay with brown patches. It may damage the weed, but it can also damage the grass around it. And then you have a new problem. Instead of a few weeds, you have dead spots in the lawn. This spray is better for places like driveway cracks, gravel paths, fence lines, patio edges, and empty spots where you can aim carefully. You also need to be careful around flowers and perennial plants. Perennials come back year after year, so the last thing you want is to weaken them because you were trying to kill one weed growing too close. If a weed is tucked between daylilies, hostas, roses, or any plant you actually want to keep, slow down. Do not rush. Use a piece of cardboard as a shield. Hold it between the weed and the good plant, then spray only the weed. It may feel a little extra, but it can save you a lot of regret. Another option is to skip the sprayer and use a small paintbrush. Dip the brush into the mixture and paint it directly onto the weed leaves. That gives you more control, especially in tight spaces. It takes longer, but it is much safer when the weed is growing close to something valuable. Another place I would avoid is near ponds, streams, wells, or any water feature. Even natural ingredients can cause problems if too much gets into the water. A small amount may not seem like a big deal, but you do not want to change the balance of a pond where fish, frogs, or aquatic plants are living. So keep this spray away from water areas. Be careful with runoff too. If your path slopes toward a pond or drainage spot, do not soak the area. Use common sense. And please do not use this like you are watering the garden. This is not a broadcast spray. You are not trying to cover every inch of soil. You are targeting individual weeds. Think of it like spot treatment. Aim at the leaves. Aim at the center of the weed. Keep the spray close. Do not stand back and miss the whole bed. That is how accidents happen. The more precise you are, the the better the results will be, and the safer your garden will stay. I learned that from my neighbor.
See, you just
Her
target
garden
the
did not look
base.
clean because
No
she
need to
sprayed
soak the
everything.
whole bed.
It looked clean
I
because
see
she
your
sprayed
difference
only
now.
what needed to go. That is the difference. So remember this simple
If you
rule.
want the plant to
If you
live,
want the plant to
keep the
live,
mixture off it.
keep this mixture off it. Do not spray it directly in
Avoid the
vegetable beds.
the
Do
lawn,
not
and
use it
especially
across your
the
lawn.
flowers here.
Be
The
careful around
perennials,
flowers
too.
and
Make sure
perennials.
you only hit
Keep
the
it away
weeds.
from ponds and wells. And when weeds grow too close to plants you want to protect, use cardboard as a shield or brush the mixture onto the weed by hand. This method is simple, but it works best when you use it carefully. A little patience with the sprayer can save the plants you actually want to keep. Here is the part that changed everything for me. Killing the weeds you can see is only half the job, maybe even less than half. Because if you kill the weeds and then leave the soil bare, new weeds will move right back in. That is exactly what happened to me for years. I would spray, pull, scrape, clean everything up, and for a few days the garden looked great. Then the next round of weeds showed up like I had never done anything at all. My neighbor explained it in a way that finally made sense. She said, "You can keep fighting weeds every week, or you can stop giving them a place to start." That stuck with me, because weed seeds need light, moisture, and open soil. If the soil is bare, they have a chance. If the cracks are open, they have a chance. If the edge of the garden bed is exposed, they have a chance. So, after the weeds die, the next step is prevention. This is the step most people skip. They think the job is finished when the weed turns brown. But that is actually the moment when you should protect the space, so the next batch of seeds does not wake up. For walkways, patio cracks, and gaps between paving stones, my neighbor uses a simple mix of sand and baking soda. The ratio is 10 parts sand to 1 part baking soda. Nothing complicated. You sweep that mixture into the cracks after the weeds are gone. The sand fills the empty space, so new weed roots have a harder time getting started. The baking soda makes that little crack less friendly for seeds. It does not have to be perfect. Just brush it in well and let it settle. This one small step can keep paths looking clean for a long time. For flower beds, she uses bark mulch. A layer about 2 to 3 inches thick is usually enough. That is around 5 to 7 centimeters. The mulch covers the soil, blocks sunlight, and makes it much harder for weed seeds to sprout. It also makes the bed look cleaner right away. And over time, bark slowly breaks down and helps improve the soil. So you are not just hiding the dirt, you are protecting it. But you do need enough mulch. A thin little sprinkle will not do much. If you can still see lots of bare soil through it, weeds can still find their way in. For vegetable beds, she does not use bark the same way. Around vegetables, straw or dried grass clippings make more sense. A layer about 2 to 4 inches thick, or roughly 5 to 10 centimeters, can help a lot. Straw is light, simple, and easy to move around plants. It keeps sunlight off the soil, holds moisture, and slowly breaks down. That means less watering, fewer weeds, and healthier soil over time. Just do not pile it right against the stems of young plants. Leave a little breathing room around them. If the mulch sits too tight against the stem, it can hold too much moisture there. For areas that always seem to grow weeds no matter what you do, the video also mentions corn gluten meal. This is used as a natural way to help stop seeds from sprouting. It does not kill big weeds that are already growing. That is not its job. It works before the weeds come up. Think of it as a prevention step. You spread it on the surface early, before the weed seeds really get going. It can be helpful in trouble spots where weeds keep coming back year after year. But the main idea is still simple. First, Deal with the weeds that are already there.
Cleared the
Then
weeds
cover
out
the ground so
completely,
new ones
then
do
laid
not get
down
an
this
easy
thick
start.
layer of
That is
mulch.
the whole system.
It looks
Spray the
perfect.
weeds.
No
Wait
weeds
for
coming
them to
back
die.
here.
Remove what is left. Then mulch, fill the cracks, and protect the open soil. Once I started doing that, the whole garden felt different. I was not spending every weekend on my knees anymore. I was not chasing the same weeds over and over. I still had to check the garden, of course. No method makes weeds disappear forever. But instead of fighting a full invasion, I was just handling a few small spots here and there. And that is a big difference. The real secret is not just the spray. The real secret is what you do after the spray. Do not just fight the weeds after they show up. Make it harder for them to come back in the first place. Cover the soil. Fill the cracks. Use mulch where it makes sense. Keep the garden from sitting open and empty, because empty soil is an invitation, and weeds are always ready to accept it.
So you hit the
Here is the
broadleaf
simple
weeds in
schedule I
early
wish I had known
spring,
years ago, because the
and then
big
switch
mistake
to
I
the
used to make was
July
waiting
treatment
until
for
the
the
weeds had
grasses.
already taken
Exactly, yeah,
over.
keeps it tidy
By
all
then,
season.
the job felt huge. I would look at the garden and think, I'll need a whole weekend just to clean this up. But my neighbor did not wait until things got out of hand. She worked with the season. She stayed a little ahead of the weeds, and that made all the difference. Around March or April, once the soil starts warming up and the first weeds begin to show themselves, that is the time for the first spray. Do not wait until the garden is covered. Catch them while they are still young. Spray the weeds in the paths, the cracks, along the fence, and around the edges of the beds. Keep it targeted. You are not soaking the whole yard. You are just dealing with the weeds that are already up. Then give it about a week. Let the mixture do its work. By then, most of the small weeds should be yellow, brown, dry, or weak enough to pull out easily. That is when you clean them up. Do not leave dead weeds sitting everywhere if they are in the way. Pull them, rake them, sweep the paths, and clear the cracks. Now the garden is ready for the part that really matters: prevention. In May, once the beds are cleaned up, start covering the open soil. Add bark mulch around flower beds. Use straw or dried grass clippings around vegetables. Sweep the sand and baking soda mix into cracks between stones or along walkways. This is the step that keeps the next wave from getting an easy start. Without it, the weeds will come back faster than you think. In June and July, you do not need to work like crazy. Just walk through the garden every couple of weeks. Take 5 or 10 minutes. Look at the edges. Check the cracks. Look around the base of fences, raised beds, and paths. If you see a few new weeds, spot spray them while they are small. That is the key. Do not let a tiny problem become a Saturday project. A small weed today takes a few seconds. A full patch of weeds later takes hours. By August, check your mulch. Summer heat, rain, wind, and watering can thin it out. Some areas may get bare again. If you see soil showing through, add a little more mulch. You do not have to redo the whole garden. Just touch up the spots that need it. This helps carry the garden through the rest of the season. Then in September or October, do one last inspection before the cold weather sets in. Look for late weeds that are trying to sneak in before winter. Spray or pull what you need to. Clean up the paths. Refill cracks if they have opened up. That way, when spring comes back around, you are not starting from a mess. You are starting from a garden that has already been managed. And that is the whole point of this schedule. It is not about doing more work. It is about doing the right work at the right time. I used to spend weekend after weekend pulling weeds, easily dozens of hours every season. My back hurt, my hands hurt, and somehow the weeds still came back. But with this system, the work is spread out and much lighter. A first spray in early spring, clean up a week later, mulch in May, A quick check every couple of weeks, a small touch-up in August, one final check in the fall. That is it. Instead of fighting weeds all season, you stay ahead of them. And once you feel that difference, gardening becomes a lot more enjoyable. You finally have time for the things you actually wanted to do, like planting flowers, growing vegetables, or just sitting outside and enjoying the yard without staring at weeds every 5 minutes. So in the end, the real secret was not some expensive product. It was not a fancy bottle with a big promise on the label. And it was not about spending every weekend on your knees pulling the same weeds over and over again. The real secret was much simpler than that. It was paying attention. It was asking someone with experience. And it was following a simple process the right way. That is what my neighbor understood. A clean garden does not happen by magic. It happens when you deal with the weeds that are already there, then stop the next ones from getting an easy start. That is the part I missed for years. I kept fighting what I could see, but I never did much to protect the bare soil afterward, so the weeds kept coming back. Once I started using the spray, at the right time, in the right weather, and only on the weeds I wanted gone, things changed. And when I followed it with mulch, filled the cracks, and kept the soil covered, the garden finally stayed cleaner for longer. That is the whole lesson here. The baking soda mix can help. The timing matters. The way you spray matters. But the step after that matters just as much. Spray the weed. Let it die. Clear it out. Then cover the ground so new seeds do not get their chance. It sounds simple because it is simple, but simple does not mean weak. Sometimes the most useful garden tricks are the ones that have been sitting right in front of us the whole time. Maybe in the kitchen cabinet, maybe across the fence, maybe in the advice of an older neighbor who has been quietly doing it right for 30 years. And honestly, that is what I love about gardening. You never really stop learning. One small tip can save you hours. One better habit can make the whole season easier. And sometimes, the best advice does not come from the internet or the store. It comes from someone who has lived it, tried it, failed a few times, and found what actually works. Now, I want to hear from you. What weed gives you the most trouble in your yard or garden? Is it dandelions, crabgrass in the cracks, bindweed climbing up the fence? Something that keeps coming back no matter how many times you pull it? Write it in the comments. Tell me what you are dealing with, because your question may help someone else who has the same problem. And if you have your own old school weed trick that has worked for you, share that too. This community gets better when people pass along what they know. If this video helped you see weeds a little differently, please give it a thumbs up. And if you enjoy simple, practical, budget-friendly garden ideas like this, subscribe to Quiet Growth Lab. We share tips that are easy to try, easy to understand, and made for real people with real gardens. No complicated talk, no expensive promises, just useful ideas you can actually use. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I really appreciate your time. I hope this helps you spend less time fighting weeds and more time enjoying the garden you worked so hard to grow. Take care, and may only the plants you actually want show up in your garden this season.